Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose?
Jim yield.
Yes, Dutton yield.
Thank you, Representative Dutton. And you may have answered this. I'm having difficulty back here hearing, so
And same up here too.
Just to pose the question again. Your changes in the statute, would they also require that the agency change the point spread for each of the applications, where presently I believe it's somewhere like 6 points are provided?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand. I can't understand what you're saying. I can't hear. I can hear you, but I can't understand exactly what's being said. Members, can we have order, please?
Okay, my question was, very briefly, your changes in statute will require the agency to change the points evaluation system at the agency so that where a letter from a state rep previously had more weight than most of the other categories, an alternative would be the resolution from the city at the same weight, or how does that work?
No, the way the situation works now is the priority list is put in statute. The points are developed by the agency. The greatest amount of points you can get under current statute is 18, which is for the financial feasibility of the project. That then goes down to quantifiable community participation, which gets 14 points. State legislator letters can engender up to 12 points, but they can also, that's the only group that has a negative 12 points attached to it. And so a state representative who chooses to write a letter in opposition to a project could cause that project to have as much as a negative 12 points. What's going to happen if, once this bill passes, with my amendment to Ms. Riddle's amendment, is now a state representative letter would still be counted, and it could be still counted at the 12 points or a negative 12 points, which is a 24-point spread. But you're also going to have the opportunity to have the community support based on letters from either the city to the city council or the county commissioners, who would then have to pass resolutions by those bodies, which could then engender up to 16 points.
A positive.
Positive, yes.
But not negative.
But there's no negative. The only negative point
is still the legislature.
Is still just for legislators. So if you didn't want a project in your district, all you'd have to do is send a letter in opposition to it. I would also just tell the members this. Most of the projects that receive low-income housing tax credits, the point spread between the winners and losers is usually a very small difference. There's a small delta there. And so that's one of the reasons these points become important.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I yield.
Thank you very much, Representative Dutton. One of my colleagues asked a question, and I want to be sure that we get, as clear as possible on this.
Okay.
We've set up an alternative mechanism, which is good for me.
Right.
But my colleague says, I'd like to have the option of saying no and having an impact on that process. Does the process we're setting up here negate that colleague's opportunity to have their no letter have a negative impact?
Absolutely not, Ms. Giddings. What can happen is, as I mentioned a moment ago, and that's why I mentioned it, that the delta between winners and losers in these applications is very small. If a legislator wrote a negative letter to a project, you could get up to 12 points for that negative letter. Most of these winners and losers are not decided by 12 points, but more like anywhere from 2 to 3 points. Okay. And so you still have an opportunity to have an impact on a project that is proposed for your district.
An additional question, Representative Dutton. These things are kind of going so fast. I want to be sure I understand, not having read the whole amendment. Does it require a resolution from the council or the commissioner's court, or
yes,
just a letter of support?
No, it requires that body pass the resolution. Lucio raised a point of order. Gentleman's time expired. Point of order is well taken.
Chair, for a purpose.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the gentleman a question, please.
Are you moving to extend time?
Yes, please.
Members, this is first extension of time. Is there objection? Chair is none, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman Dutton. And I appreciate you bringing this amendment forward. The only thing that I worry about with respect to the amendment is if a member of the legislature, by way of example, issues a letter against a project and the governing body of the municipality issues a letter in favor of the project, how is that resolved in the amendment as amended?
Well, that's a good question, Mr. Anchira, and let me, if I could, that's a question that I'm not absolutely certain of at this point myself. I know what it says, but the practical effect of it is I'm not sure how that would work, because the way the bill is structured is that, as I mentioned before, in the statute prescribes sort of the rating system. Then the agency decides the actual, quantifies the point score. The way it works now is that if you got a letter from your state representative, let's say against it, you could get a negative 12 points. However, if you went and got a resolution from your city council, then that could be a plus in terms of 16 points, is the way it works. But then you would have, obviously, in terms of the overall scheme of things, you would have only a positive 2 points.
Or 4 points probably, right?
4 points, yes, right.
Yeah, okay.
4 points, I'm sorry, yes. Yeah,
okay.
right. So
they would virtually net out.
They would virtually net out.
Okay.
Somebody asked that question also in terms of if the senator, for example, who will happen to be in this bill now, but I understand who don't want to be, if the senator wrote a letter in favor of the project, and then the representative for that area wrote a letter in opposition to the project, how would that work? Well, what I'm told is that they would offset each other. And so the project would get 0 points. And so that's the way the system works at the moment. I will tell you this, I'm not at all completely comfortable with that point system, but we're going to let this bill go on because I think it's something we're going to fix.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Dutton sends up an amendment to the amendment acceptable to the author. Is there objection? Chair is none. Amendment to the amendment is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This amendment simply states that a resolution from the local governing body is required in order for an applicant to receive tax credits through the non-competitive 4% program. I believe it's acceptable to the author.
Mr. Isaac offers up a substitute amendment to Mrs. Riddle's amendment. That amendment is acceptable to Mrs. Riddle. Is there any objection? Chair is none. So ordered. We now have a substitute amendment of Mrs. Riddle's that is acceptable to the author, Mr. Dutton. Is there any objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Following amendment, the clerk will please read the amendment.
Amendment by vote.
Oh. Okay. Apologize, members, that amendment had been withdrawn. The Vo amendment is withdrawn. Following amendment, the clerk will please read the amendment.
Amendment by Anchia.
Chair recognizes Mr. Anchia to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members. TDHCA provides millions of dollars in federal and state funds to construct affordable housing for low-income Texans. In 2001, the legislature recognized the potential for misuse of these funds by applicants and authorized TDHCA to prohibit bad actors from participation. Unfortunately, this authority is currently limited to the low-income housing tax credit. This amendment corrects this oversight by authorizing TDHCA board to adopt rules to debar violators for failure to comply with policies across all programs. This statutory change will give TDHCA the ability to protect taxpayer-supported programs and ensures the best use of existing state and federal housing resources. The amendment does a second thing and addresses another issue within the department, which is the need to give developers reasonable opportunities to cure in cases of noncompliance. I thank the agency and the Texas Association of Affordable Housing for jointly developing this amendment. Move adoption.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Garcia, for what purpose? Will the gentleman yield for questions?
I yield, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman Dutton. I had a moment to step back and visit with TDHCA,
right.
And they expressed some concern about the operation of the amendment as amended.
Right.
And just to be clear, we can obviously fix this either now or in third reading or when we've had a chance to vet it. But their understanding was the amendment as amended does not create an either-or scoring system.
Right.
It is a cumulative scoring system.
Well, that's what I've just been advised, but our intent is to make it or, and we'll either fix it now on third reading, Mr. Chairman.
And then if it is either or, we also may want to think about language that we need to make sure if they're in conflict. If you're in either or and you're in conflict, do we in fact net out? Do we in fact net out those numbers?
I think you and I can get together with Ms. Riddle, and we'll kind of figure that out. But I think the other point is that the or is what's intended by this amendment.
Thank you, Mr.
As
Chairman.
amended, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Anchi offers up an amendment. The amendment is acceptable to the author. Is there any objection? Chair is none. So ordered. Members, I'd like to say a special welcome to former House member Senator Kelly Hancock. We want to thank him for being on the floor with us. Also, members, he's not been here for a while, but we also want to recognize former House member Senator Tommy Williams, who's with us. And members, we also want to recognize former House member and now Senator Glenn Hager, the great Glenn Hager. I'm sorry. Members excused, Representatives Kemple, Cook, Frullo, Doug Miller. I'm sorry, members, they've returned. Members, they were in a committee meeting. That committee meeting is broken up and they've returned. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on, for, or against Mr. Dutton's 3361? Seeing no one, the chair recognizes Mr. Dutton to close.
Mr. Speaker and members, thank you. I move adoption of House Bill 3361.
All those in favor of passage of House Bill 3361 to third reading, say aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes obviously have it. House Bill 3361 is passed to third reading. Chair recognizes Representative Isaac for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I move to suspend all necessary rules and take up in consideration House Resolution 1602.
Clerk will read the resolution.
H.R. 1602 by Isaac, congratulating Connie Reed, founder and CEO of Consuelo, on the opening of her new store in downtown Austin.
Chair recognizes Mr. Isaac to fully explain the resolution.
This is a resolution for a constituent of the grand opening of Consuela